Surgeon General's warning: smoking causes lung cancer, heart disease, emphysema, and may complicate pregnancy. In the 1970s, Ramel Jones, small-town restaurant owner, grew tired of the negative effects of secondhand smoke and wished to eliminate smoking in her restaurant. Partnering with the American Lung Association, Arts Cafe and the city of Moose Lake became the first city in Minnesota to eliminate smoking in restaurants. This grassroots movement, started by Ramel Jones, was a turning point in history because it led to a statewide ban on smoking in restaurants. In the early 1900s, the rush to the lighter took over many cities in the United States. At that time, advertising and marketing popularized smoking. The popular and cool thing to do was to go out back and smoke a cigarette with your friends. Little did people know the huge physical, emotional, and financial consequences that would result from looking cool. When the realization that smoking was physically harmful set in, people tried to make stricter rules regarding smoking. In 1966, the first Surgeon General's warning was put on packages of cigarettes. The original statement put on the packages claimed, "Smoking may be hazardous to your health." It was updated a few times before 1984, when 4 different statements were created, making more specific claims regarding the consequences of smoking. Starting in 1971, tobacco companies couldn't advertise for their products on television or over the radio. Cigarettes stopped being a part of military rations in 1975. Also in 1975, Minnesota passed the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act. By passing this law, Minnesota became the first state to pass legislation that limited smoking in the workplace. This act required non-smoking areas in most workplaces, including restaurants and bars. Regarding the bill, co-author Phyllis Kahn stated,
"It was the strongest law on no smoking in public places, probably in the country. And the important thing that it did, when we passed it, and we passed it in 1975, the important thing was that every other law that had written before that just listed kind of an increasing number of places where you couldn't stop smoke. What this bill did took a different approach, which is we prohibited smoking everywhere unless it was expressively permitted. And where it was permitted, we required the division, into no smoking and smoking sections, and like in a restaurant.
The Minnesota Coalition for a Smoke-Free Society was created in 1984 with the goal of preventing children from smoking and protecting them from the effects of secondhand smoke. They also provided aid to those who wished to quit smoking. Then, in 1998, the Master Settlement Agreement took place. 46 state attorney generals and the 5 largest tobacco companies went head-to-head. The tobacco companies were later forbidden from directly or indirectly targeting youth, providing free samples of their products, putting up promotional billboards, and holding promotional programs or activities. In the same year, California became the first state to make restaurants 100% smoke-free. Many states soon followed. Finally, it was Minnesota's turn. Pat McCone is the Director for Tobacco Control Programs and Policy for the American Lung Association. After seeing the success other states had, she wanted to go smoke-free in restaurants in Minnesota. What she needed was a place to start. Meanwhile, in the town of Moose Lake, a rural town located in northeastern Minnesota about 45 miles south of Duluth, Ramel Jones was busy as the owner of the restaurant Arts Cafe. Often thought of as the smokiest place in town, Arts Cafe was known for its good food and cheap prices. Ramel loved her restaurant, but not all the smoke that came with it. She had seen firsthand the effects smoking had on people's health. Both of her parents died of lung cancer as a result of smoking for so many years. Ramel remembers her father telling her that, "I'm not afraid to die, but I'm so mad at myself for letting something control me all my life that's killing me now." Ramel wanted to make a change and have Arts Cafe be smoke-free, but she was afraid to do it on her own.
Say, "Oh, you're going to go out of business and nobody will come in here anymore." One day I got a phone call from the American Lung Association, and a voice on the other end of the phone said, what would you think of Arts Cafe being smoke-free? And I said, and I remember I was standing right here in this kitchen when I got the phone call, and I said, I would love it. What can I do to help?
Now that the American Lung Association had Ramel on their side, they needed to set their plan into action.
The first step in any kind of policy change is to educate both those people most directly impacted, but the community also as a whole. So we really work to educate people about the why there should be a change, the health effects around secondhand smoke, the research that had been done to that time on any kind of economic impact of making the change, and then to listen to the stories and listen to the questions and concerns and address those as best that we could.
Ramel worked hard introducing the idea and talking to people as much as she could. Once the topic was out there, people voiced their opinions, both positive and negative. Pat and Ramel received threatening letters and phone calls. Although these negative things were unsettling, they decided to push through. They believed the positive outweighed the negative and also got many positive letters supporting their cause. Many people voiced their opinions in letters to the editor.
I was called a communist in one, and then another guy told me that I was a pioneer. And I thought, I'm a little communist pioneer. But it was lots and lots of opinions and lots of sorting the issue out. And was it really harmful?
The whole town was holding its breath on July 12, 2000. This was the night the city council voted on the ordinance. There were 2 council members for it, 2 against it, and 1 in the middle. That swing vote belonged to a man named John Unzen. Although there was pressure from both sides, John says the real clincher was what the, quote, Joe average citizen, end quote, had to say. John decided to vote yes, and the ordinance was passed. Now the question was, would it work? Although many regular customers threatened not to return if the ordinance passed, Ramel noticed they returned after only a few weeks. Besides her regulars, Ramel got new customers who told her they had never eaten there before because it was too smoky. People eventually adjusted to the change, and Ramel's last year of owning Arts Cafe was her most profitable ever. Because of the success in Moose Lake, other cities decided it could work for them too. Increasing numbers of restaurants and cities went 100% smoke-free in Minnesota.
When a fire starts, it starts small with that spark. And then it needs more fuel and more oxygen. So I think Moose Lake was the spark. I think some of the fuel and oxygen came after Duluth, a larger city that some of the metropolitan areas could more relate to. It did, and then I think the really big bonfire started when the Twin Cities went, when Minneapolis and St. Paul. And that definitely, it was then not a matter of if the state would go smoke-free, but when. But once again, you cannot have a fire without a spark, and that spark was Moose Lake.
At a statewide level, there were many complaints that the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act wasn't strong enough. Even though there was a smoking section in restaurants and other workplaces, the smoke still traveled throughout the entire building. State Representative Phyllis Kong co-wrote the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act in 1975. She was a big supporter of the amendment to her act, Freedom to Breathe. This amendment revised the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act and made stricter rules as to where you could smoke. This act outlawed smoking entirely in restaurants and bars in Minnesota. Because of the push from cities and towns all over Minnesota, the Freedom to Breathe Act was signed into law on May 16, 2007 by Governor Tim Pawlenty. The act took effect on October 1, 2007. Nationally, many other states put their own non-smoking acts into effect soon after Minnesota did. Non-smoking groups like the American Lung Association didn't just stop with banning smoking. In 2009, the Tobacco Control Act was signed. This gave the FDA power to regulate the manufacturing, sale, and distribution of tobacco products. 3 years later, in 2012, the FDA changed the Surgeon General's warning that was on the sides of cigarette packs to large graphic pictures and warnings on the front and back of the packages. Something so small as one person can turn the course of history in a different direction. By Ramel taking a chance with her restaurant, she opened the door for a healthier tomorrow. Ramel created the spark, and today, Minnesota joins 27 other states nationwide where there is no smoking or no service in restaurants.